The signal came at midnight, a faint, rhythmic pulse that defied natural explanation. Buried beneath layers of cosmic noise, its pattern was unmistakably artificial. It originated not from the heavens, as scientists had long hoped, but from deep beneath the sands of Egypt. Dr. Elena Vargas, a cryptologist turned archaeologist, stared at the spectral analysis on her laptop. The signal repeated every 33 seconds, growing stronger with each cycle. Beside her, Amir Hassan, an expert in ancient Egyptian engineering, looked equally puzzled. "This doesn't make sense," Amir muttered, running his fingers through his sand-dusted hair. "The source is over 4,000 years old. How could it still be active?" The two of them sat in a makeshift lab on the edge of the Great Sand Sea, where a recent sandstorm had uncovered the entrance to a previously unknown structure. Unlike other pyramids, this one was sleek, angular, and constructed from a material that modern geologists couldn't identify. Its surface shimmered under moonlight, as though resisting the passage of time. "You're assuming it ever stopped," Elena said, her voice tinged with unease. "What if this signal has been broadcasting for millennia, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice?" Before Amir could reply, a sudden burst of static filled the air. The laptop screen flickered, and a new sequence of glyphs scrolled across it. Elena gasped. The symbols were an exact match to a mysterious script found on fragments of the pyramid's outer wall, a language no one had ever deciphered. By dawn, the news had spread beyond their camp. A joint team of military and civilian experts descended on the site, including Colonel David Reynolds, whose unit specialized in securing potentially hazardous discoveries. "This doesn't feel like archaeology," Reynolds muttered to his second-in-command as they approached the pyramid's entrance. "It feels like a trap." Inside, the pyramid was unlike anything they expected. The walls seemed alive, pulsating faintly with an iridescent glow. Every step they took activated sensors embedded in the floor, lighting the path ahead. It was clear the structure had been designed with purpose, not as a tomb, but as something functional. "What is this place?" Amir whispered, his voice echoing in the cavernous interior. Elena ran her fingers over the walls, where glyphs morphed and shifted under her touch. She turned to the group, her face pale. "It's not a tomb. It's a machine." "What kind of machine?" Reynolds asked, gripping his rifle. "The kind that wasn't built by human hands," she replied, her voice trembling. Deeper inside, the air grew colder. The team reached a vast chamber where a massive obelisk stood at the center. Suspended above it was a hovering sphere of light, pulsating in time with the mysterious signal. The obelisk's surface was engraved with more shifting glyphs, which now glowed bright enough to illuminate the entire room. Amir approached the obelisk, ignoring Reynolds' warning to stay back. "This technology, it's beyond anything we've ever seen. If the ancient Egyptians built this..." "They didn't," Elena interrupted, staring at the sphere. "This predates them by thousands of years. The Egyptians found it, worshipped it, and hid it." Reynolds stepped forward. "Hid it from what?" Elena's gaze didn't waver from the sphere. "From us." The room trembled, and the sphere's pulsations quickened. A deep, guttural hum reverberated through the pyramid, shaking the team to their core. Lights flickered, and the glyphs on the walls began to shift more rapidly, as if alive. Suddenly, the sphere emitted a low, resonant tone. One by one, the team members froze, their eyes wide with terror. Through the static of their comms, a distorted voice whispered a single phrase. Before anyone could react, the sphere expanded, engulfing the room in blinding light. Elena felt herself being lifted off the ground, her mind overwhelmed by a flood of images, ancient civilizations, cosmic cataclysms, and an endless void teeming with otherworldly figures. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The team was back on the ground, the room silent. The sphere had vanished, leaving the obelisk inert. "What just happened?" Reynolds asked, his voice shaking. Elena's hands trembled as she pointed to the obelisk. New glyphs had appeared, burning bright red. "It sent a message," she whispered. "Not to us, to them." Reynolds' face darkened. "To who?" Elena turned to him, her expression a mixture of dread and wonder. Whoever built this? As the words left her lips, the ground rumbled again. From somewhere deep below, the unmistakable sound of machinery stirred to life. Something was waking up, and it was no longer content to remain buried. The sands outside began to shift violently, as though the desert itself was alive. And somewhere in the void of space, a signal was received. Elena's mind raced as the rumbling intensified. She could feel it, deep in her bones. Whatever was awakening beneath them was ancient, powerful, and indifferent to their presence. The obelisk, now completely inert, offered no answers. "Everyone out, now," Colonel Reynolds barked, his voice cutting through the rising panic. His team sprang into action, pulling equipment and personnel toward the exit. Elena hesitated, her eyes still locked on the shifting glyphs on the walls, which flickered faintly like dying embers. "Elena, move," Amir shouted, grabbing her arm. "I can't leave this," she protested, her voice almost pleading. "This is the greatest discovery in human history. Not if we're buried with it," Amir snapped, dragging her toward the exit. Behind them, the walls began to crack, and a low, resonant hum filled the air. It wasn't just a sound, it felt alive, probing their minds, their very existence. Outside, the desert was in chaos. The sands swirled in unnatural patterns, forming spiraling vortices that defied the laws of nature. The pyramid itself was transforming, its once solid walls glowing as segments slid and shifted like a puzzle box. What had been hidden for millennia was no longer content to remain concealed. Reynolds' team scrambled to establish a perimeter, setting up sensors and deploying drones to monitor the rapidly changing structure. One of the drones transmitted a live feed of the pyramid's apex, where a thin beam of light now shot into the sky, splitting the clouds and disappearing into the cosmos. "Tell me that's not a distress signal," Reynolds muttered to Elena, who stood beside him, transfixed. "It's more than that," she whispered. "It's an invitation or a warning." Hours passed, and the beam of light continued uninterrupted. Satellites across the globe detected the anomaly, prompting a flurry of activity among world governments. The signal's intensity disrupted communications, blacking out entire regions as it expanded its reach. Meanwhile, Elena and Amir worked tirelessly in the makeshift lab, poring over the data they had gathered. The glyphs, though still largely undeciphered, appeared to be a form of ancient mathematical code, a language that transcended culture and time. "This is more than a signal," Amir said, his voice tight with urgency. "It's a key. Whatever this pyramid is, it's unlocking something. Or someone," Elena added grimly. As night fell, the temperature around the pyramid plummeted unnaturally. The air shimmered with static, and an unearthly silence settled over the camp. Then, without warning, the light beam flickered and collapsed, plunging the area into darkness. "What just happened?" Reynolds demanded, gripping his rifle. Before anyone could answer, the ground erupted. Massive, cylindrical structures began to rise from the sand around the pyramid, their surfaces inscribed with the same glowing glyphs. Each one emitted a low-frequency hum that resonated deep in the chest, a sound that seemed to bypass the ears entirely. "It's a network," Elena realized, her breath catching. "These are conduits." "For what?" Amir asked, his voice trembling. Elena didn't answer. She didn't need to. The conduits pulsed in unison, their light intensifying until the entire desert glowed like the surface of a dying star. And then, in the blink of an eye, the pulse vanished, absorbed into the ground. The silence that followed was short-lived. From the depths of the pyramid came a deep, mechanical roar, like the sound of titanic gears grinding to life. The earth shook violently, and the pyramid's base began to split apart, revealing a cavernous opening filled with searing blue light. From within the light, shadowy figures began to emerge. Tall, humanoid forms that seemed to be made of the same iridescent material as the pyramid's walls. They moved with deliberate precision, their faceless heads turning toward the gathered humans. "Everyone, hold your fire," Reynolds shouted, though his own grip on his weapon betrayed his unease. The figures stopped at the edge of the light, their forms shimmering as though caught between dimensions. One of them raised an arm, and the air around it warped. A voice echoed, not in sound, but directly in the minds of everyone present. Your time has come. The cycle begins anew. Elena staggered back, clutching her head as the voice overwhelmed her senses. Images flooded her mind, of stars being born and dying, of civilizations rising and falling, and of an unbroken cycle of creation and destruction overseen by these ancient beings. They're not here to help us, she gasped. They're here to judge us. Reynolds' face hardened. Then we fight. Before anyone could stop him, he raised his rifle and fired. The bullet struck the figure but disintegrated on contact, the kinetic energy absorbed harmlessly. The figure turned its faceless head toward Reynolds, and a wave of force sent him flying backward. Stop! Elena shouted, stepping forward. We can't fight them. We need to understand them. The figure tilted its head, as if considering her words. Another voice echoed in her mind, this one softer, almost curious. You seek understanding? Then prove your worth. The ground beneath her feet began to glow, forming a circular platform. Elena felt herself being lifted into the air, her body weightless as the light enveloped her. Around her, the glyphs danced, their meanings suddenly clear. She was being tested. And somewhere, far beyond the earth, something was watching. Elena felt her consciousness expanding as the glyphs burned into her mind, revealing truths no human was meant to comprehend. Memories of Earth's history flashed before her eyes. The triumphs, the failures, the relentless determination of humanity to survive against all odds. These beings weren't just ancient. They were architects, cosmic custodians who had observed countless civilizations across the galaxy. Your kind is young, the voice said, echoing through her thoughts. Fragile. Reckless. Why should you be allowed to persist? But Elena wasn't overwhelmed. Humanity's indomitable spirit surged through her, filling her with defiance. She steadied her breath, the weight of her ancestors pressing against her shoulders. Her mind sharpened, slicing through the noise of their challenge. Because we endure, she said aloud, her voice steady and resolute. We learn. We grow. And when we fall, we rise again. The figures tilted their heads, their forms rippling like disturbed water. Many have said the same. They fell to their own hubris. Then you've seen nothing like us, she snapped. We're flawed, yes. But we create beauty out of chaos. We fight for each other. We adapt, no matter the odds. Show me another race that took to the stars from the ashes of their own mistakes. Meanwhile, outside the pyramid, chaos erupted. The conduits that had risen from the sands began to project massive holographic images of Earth's history into the night sky. Battles, discoveries, disasters, and triumphs played out like a grand tapestry for all to see. The soldiers, scientists, and observers on site watched in stunned silence as the story of humanity unfolded. Colonel Reynolds, recovering from his earlier blow, barked orders to his team. We're not going to sit here and be judged. Get those drones in the air. I want every piece of data we can gather. If we go down fighting. But as the drones soared into the swirling vortex above the pyramid, their feeds transmitted something startling. The conduits weren't just broadcasting Earth's history, they were analyzing it. Patterns of resilience, cooperation, and innovation lit up in real time as the beings assessed humanity's worth. Back inside the pyramid, the voice in Elena's mind grew more insistent. You boast of your endurance, your growth. Yet you poison your world, wage wars, and seek to dominate. Prove to us there is something beyond your destruction. Elena's lips curled into a wry smile. You've seen it already. In every story, every moment of sacrifice. You want proof of humanity's greatness? Look at the mother who starves so her child can eat. Look at the scientist who spends their life curing diseases they'll never suffer. Look at the explorers who risk everything to touch the stars. The glowing figures paused. The air around Elena grew still, heavy with the weight of an unseen judgment. Then the central figure spoke, its voice no longer cold but tinged with curiosity. "And what would you do, given the power to alter your fate?" Elena's heart raced. She glanced back at Amir, who stood frozen at the chamber's edge, his wide eyes urging her to answer carefully. She inhaled deeply, summoning every ounce of courage she had. "I would give humanity the tools to save itself, not just from destruction, but from stagnation." "You want us to prove our worth? Then give us the chance to rise above the flaws you see." The figures shifted, their forms coalescing into a single entity that loomed over Elena. "Very well. You will be tested. Your kind will be tested. The choice is yours. Will you rise, or will you fall?" The platform beneath Elena began to dissolve, and she was gently lowered to the ground. The obelisk at the chamber's center started to pulse, its light growing brighter and more intense. She turned to Amir, who rushed to her side. "What did you say to them?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I asked for a chance," she said simply. "Now we have to earn it." The obelisk emitted a final pulse, and a series of metallic panels slid open to reveal a small, crystalline object hovering in its core. It radiated energy, more potent than anything human technology could produce. "This is their gift," Elena murmured, reaching out hesitantly. Amir grabbed her arm. "Are you sure? What if it's a trap?" Elena shook her head. "It's not a weapon. It's a seed." As the crystalline object pulsed in her hands, the conduits outside the pyramid began to retract into the ground. The swirling sands calmed, and the holograms in the sky faded. But the glyphs carved into the pyramid's surface remained, now glowing faintly, as if waiting for something. The voice returned, softer this time, resonating in every mind at the sight. "Your time begins now. Use what we have given you wisely. We will return." The desert fell silent, and the stars above shone brighter than ever. Back at the camp, Reynolds and his team regrouped, their weapons lowered but their expressions wary. "What do we do now?" Reynolds asked, his voice heavy with uncertainty. Elena looked at the crystalline object in her hands, its light reflecting in her eyes. "We show them who we are." Somewhere in the vastness of space, a signal was received. A council of beings far older than the Earth deliberated. The humans had passed the first test, but the true challenge lay ahead. Humanity's resilience had impressed them, but would their ambition lead to salvation or ruin? Only time would tell. The camp buzzed with uneasy energy as the team regrouped. The crystalline object Elena held was warm in her hands, its pulses syncing faintly with her heartbeat. It was alive, not in the biological sense, but in a way that defied explanation. She could feel its power humming beneath her skin, as though it was searching her, testing her resolve. Amir leaned closer, inspecting the artifact with awe. "Elena, this thing, it's like a data core, but not of any technology we've ever seen. It could hold the key to unlimited energy, advanced medicine, or even space travel." Reynolds, still nursing a bruised rib, stepped forward. "Or it could be a ticking time bomb. We don't even know what it is, let alone what it's capable of. For all we know, activating it could bring those things back, or worse." Elena met his eyes, her expression resolute. "They didn't give this to destroy us. They gave it to see what we'll do with it. It's a challenge, a leap forward, or a fall into chaos." Reynolds frowned. "And what makes you so sure?" "Because we're still standing," Elena said simply. "If they wanted to destroy us, they wouldn't have left us a choice." As dawn broke over the desert, the team packed up their camp. The artifact was carefully secured in a specialized containment unit, shielded from potential interference. Elena, Amir, and Reynolds led the convoy back to Cairo, where a coalition of scientists, engineers, and world leaders was already assembling to discuss the discovery. News of the pyramid and the mysterious event had spread globally. Satellite footage of the glowing glyphs and the beam of light had gone viral, sparking debates, fear, and hope. Nations that once stood divided were now united by a singular focus: deciphering the artifact and understanding its implications. In a secured research facility outside Cairo, the brightest minds on Earth gathered to study the artifact. It emitted a constant, low-frequency hum, and when connected to diagnostic equipment, it produced streams of data that no algorithm could decipher. "This thing doesn't just contain knowledge," Amir said during a briefing. "It's a framework. A blueprint. But for what, we don't know yet." Elena stood at the edge of the room, her arms crossed. "It's more than that. It's a mirror. It's reflecting what we're capable of, testing whether we can rise to the occasion." Reynolds, standing nearby, grunted. "Let's hope it doesn't reflect our worst tendencies." Weeks turned into months as teams worked around the clock to unlock the artifact's secrets. Slowly, patterns emerged. The data streams were decoded into equations, ones that hinted at revolutionary advancements in energy generation, material science, and even interstellar propulsion. But the breakthroughs didn't come without challenges. As humanity raced to understand the artifact, tensions flared between nations vying for control. Some feared the technology could be weaponized, while others saw it as an opportunity to cement global dominance. Elena found herself in the center of the storm, advocating for cooperation. "This isn't just a gift, it's a responsibility," she argued during a United Nations assembly. "The beings who left this for us are watching. If we misuse it, we'll fail the test." Her words resonated with some but fell on deaf ears among others. The world teetered on the edge of unity and chaos. Then, 6 months after the artifact's discovery, the signal returned. This time, it wasn't a faint pulse. It was a roaring cascade of energy that disrupted communications worldwide. The skies over Cairo lit up with holographic glyphs, spelling out a single, chilling message in a dozen languages. "Your decision approaches." Elena, Amir, and Reynolds stood on the rooftop of the research facility, watching the display. The artifact in its containment unit began to glow brighter, its hum growing louder. "What does it mean?" Amir asked, his voice barely audible over the deafening hum. Elena stared at the glyphs, her mind racing. "They're coming back. They want to see what we've done." Reynolds tightened his grip on his rifle. "And if they don't like what they see?" Elena didn't answer. Deep down, she already knew the stakes. The artifact wasn't just a test, it was a beacon. The beings who had left it were returning, and their judgment would shape humanity's future. When the beings arrived, they didn't come in ships. They appeared in the sky as shimmering colossal forms, each one a towering silhouette of light and energy. Their presence caused tremors across the globe, as if the Earth itself recognized their arrival. One of the figures descended over Cairo, its faceless head tilting toward the research facility. A voice echoed in everyone's minds, calm but unwavering. "Show us your choice." Elena stepped forward, the artifact cradled in her hands. She spoke not just for herself but for humanity. "We've studied it. We've learned from it. And we've chosen to use it, not to conquer, but to heal. To unite. To build a future worthy of your trust." The figure's light pulsed, and the artifact in Elena's hands rose into the air. It spun rapidly, beams of light shooting out in all directions. Images of Earth appeared, showing nations working together to harness the artifact's potential. Renewable energy networks, advanced medical breakthroughs, and plans for interstellar exploration flashed across the holograms. But then the images darkened. They revealed the conflicts, the hoarding of resources, and the greed that had nearly derailed the project. Elena felt her heart sink. The voice spoke again. "Your potential is vast, but so is your recklessness. Humanity teeters on the edge of greatness and destruction." The light grew brighter, and the ground trembled. Everyone braced for the worst. But then the figure's tone softened. "Yet you endure. Against all odds, you rise." The artifact emitted a final pulse, and the figures in the sky began to fade. Before vanishing completely, the voice left a parting message. "The cycle begins anew. You are the architects of your destiny." As the light faded and the world returned to normal, Elena looked at the now dormant artifact. It was empty, its power transferred to humanity's hands. The beings had left, but their message remained clear. Reynolds stepped beside her. "What happens now?" Elena smiled faintly. Now we prove them right, or wrong. Across the globe, humanity stood at a crossroads. The gift had been given, the judgment passed. And for the first time in history, the choice was truly theirs.